Hey everybody, it's John from Humor and History. I hope you're all doing well. Let's get into this one. I'm kind of curious. This piqued my interest, and I don't know much about just like right after the Napoleonic period, and I believe this is it. Well, to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about the Napoleonic period compared to probably what you all know. So this is more new to me. Why Britain gave Indonesia back to the Netherlands?
During the Napoleonic Wars, Britain found itself at one time or another fighting against most European countries, and amongst those was the Netherlands, which was defeated and made into a French puppet before being annexed entirely. During this period of Dutch subjugation, Britain seized its overseas empire until the end of the war, at which point the United Kingdom returned Indonesia, an extremely profitable colony, to the Netherlands, in spite of keeping other, less valuable lands. Which raises the question, why? Why did Britain return Indonesia to the Netherlands?
Well, that's a fair question. I actually don't know, and I'm sure this is going
So, as the
to make sense.
Napoleonic Wars dragged on, one of Britain's primary goals was to starve France and her allies of overseas trade.
By the way, a very great way to deal with things. If you can blockade if anyone can make a blockade, it's going to be Great Britain. So, there you go. We did it during the American Civil War. We went from 43 ships to 661 ships within like 3 years. And eventually it started to work, but it took time.
When the Netherlands was annexed into the French Empire, the British decided to act and deprive France of the Dutch East Indies and its profits. It conquered Java in 1811 and held on to it until Napoleon's first defeat in 1814. At this point, the coalition allies opted to restore the Netherlands to a kingdom with the...
By the way, I think Britain's pretty much the only power that... I'm not just saying for this time period necessarily, but Britain's sort of like the only power that could have the ability to do this. Okay, so France annexes it, so Britain comes in and takes over. Only Britain's Navy could do that, at least in my experience. But as I said, I don't know much. I don't know a lot about the Napoleonic era, and all the ins and outs. I guess I should say that.
These borders. The reason for this was that Austria, Russia, and Britain wanted a buffer state between France and Prussia
Sure.
to stop any wars before they started and keep the balance of power intact.
In a weird way, and you can. I'm not saying this is the right argument or the wrong argument. I mean, that's essentially what Russia's trying to do right now is have a bit of a buffer state. Stop the expansion of NATO. Not, just different time periods and different ways of going about it.
Now, Britain was in possession of the Dutch overseas empire and as a result held all of the cards. And as such, it was up to Britain to decide what to return and what to keep, and it kept all of these, notably taking half of Dutch Guiana and Cape Colony.
Yeah.
Britain handed the Dutch East Indies back, so why? Well, the primary reason was to make sure that the Netherlands remained strong. If robbed of all of their colonies, the Dutch would lose access to a lot of wealth and thus would be too weak to deter either France or Prussia.
Well, that's a great point. Keep your allies strong. That makes a lot of sense, and you help. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going.
Now, Britain could have kept that wealth for itself, but the hope was that Britain wouldn't have to get involved in continental affairs if the Netherlands was a deterrent. Initially, the British government had intended to hand all of the Dutch colonies back. However, Guyana made a lot of money for British sugar companies, and the Royal Navy wanted to keep control of the waters around the Cape of Africa. And so the Prime Minister was under a lot of pressure to keep the useful bits. Another reason was that the British government was asked by the East India Company not to keep Java. The reason was that the East India Company was worried about overextending itself and potentially being dragged into a war that would cost money. The cost of extra defences would be pricey, and the returns were now much smaller.
If you look back at Indonesia right there, there's no way. If you even go to World War II, when in 1941, at that point, how do you defend? And it's a much bigger area. How do you defend all that? And of course, that's India all the way down across to most of Oceania. I can't say that. Got to defend that whole thing. And the Japanese just came right in. Really, how do you defend all that? That's tough.
Much smaller. This was because when Britain was running the colony, it took over the growing of its cash crops. And because making money was popular, they stole the secrets of how to grow them, as well as the crops themselves. It did, however, give the Netherlands the ability to expand across the region and make more money than they were previously.
Okay.
Which to Britain seemed like a win, and would also act as a means of keeping the Dutch friendly. And also, Britain acknowledging their ownership of Java would hopefully act as a warning to others. Interestingly though, this was not the last time that the UK would hand Indonesia back to the Dutch.
Really?
Because in the immediate aftermath of Japan's surrender in World War II, Britain occupied Indonesia.
Yeah.
The UK did this to give the Netherlands time to build up the troop numbers necessary to repress any push for independence. In 1946, the Dutch were able to return, and Britain immediately handed over control and tried to help them suppress the Indonesian revolutionaries. The hope was that by re-establishing the Dutch Empire, there would be less pressure on the UK to relinquish its empire in the area too. This ultimately didn't work, and it signalled the end of Britain and the Dutch having any say in Indonesia. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
You know, I actually did. That's something I didn't know. But if you think about it, it absolutely does make sense. You want your allies to be powerful. You know, and I don't want to say you want people to be successful. It's more of a, you want your friends to be successful and as well as whatever. But that makes a lot of sense. All right, let me know what you guys think. Did you learn anything today? I kind of did. I'm really, the more I learn, I know this is an old statement or but adage, but the more I learn, the more I realize I do not know. And I appreciate you all keeping me on the straight and narrow. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.